I bloody love Blue Costello.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
It's converted so many of my friends. It's so funny because it used to be something I'd bring along to every barbecue or dinner, and people would be like, "Oh, I don't like blue cheese too much," and then they would have that. It is a gateway. So yeah, there's so many people that have been converted by the Blue Costello.
G'day and welcome to a brand new, yep, you guessed it, another business podcast. Because what the world really needs now is two middle-aged blokes with microphones and an audience. But here we are. In each episode, we chat with some of the best people we know, and a few we just owe favours to, about all things brand. Recent and relevant campaigns, infamous disasters, a few nostalgic gems, and the occasionally brilliant accident. Mostly though, we're just curious about the amazing journeys that our guests have taken to end up on this podcast. So buckle up, it's Branding, a brand new podcast, where some things are best left said.
Hi, so I'm Chris.
I'm Dan.
And we're from The Gurus. And we're here today with Rucha Sarma, Senior Brand Manager at Bel Australia. And we just want to ask her some questions about her life experiences and what she's currently doing and what's brought her to where she is now. Rucha, we know you've had an incredibly varied life. You've lived, if we're not mistaken, in 12 countries on 5 continents. Based on this wonderful experience, what consumer or brand insights have sort of been most valuable in helping shape your current role and what you're doing in that role?
Cool. So firstly, Chris and Dan, really happy to be here today and share some insights and a bit more about my experience. Quite a varied life across 5 different continents and 12 countries. I think there's quite a few things on a daily basis that I don't even realize, but I still implement from all my travels and having all these nomadic adventures. I think firstly what's really helped me is just connecting with people, because when you're traveling and living in places where you don't even speak the language or know much about the culture, it's really getting to know who they are and how to connect with them. And as a marketer, I think that's the number one quality you need to have, how to connect with consumers. The other part is probably adaptability, because again, when you're living in new cultures, it's not business as usual. There's always curveballs and things that are different. I think as a marketer, you need to be good at communication. And again, it's kind of related to the connection part of it. And then maybe lastly, it's curiosity. Because when you move and travel, you're curious and you want to see how things work. And as a marketer, I think it's so important to have that curiosity to know what the trends are, what people are thinking, what people are saying about your brands. So having that open mind that travel exposes you to, I think it's key to doing marketing as well.
Just to build, thank you, and just to build out a bit on that, just share with the audience where you've been. Where did your journey take you from and to broadly? Maybe not all 12 countries, but some of the interesting ones where maybe culture and language was different. Give us a little bit of little bit more detail on that. It'd be interesting.
Sure. Maybe I think the craziest one or the wild card is Nigeria. And I think that's the one that people always go like, whoa. Yeah. So I was in Nigeria for 8 months when I worked in my previous company, Arla. It was an 8-month assignment and I was part of a grad program. And it was funny, I'd never lived in Africa and that was my number one wish, to go and move to Africa. And I remember HR coming to me and they're like, Rucha, we have a project in Africa. Would you be interested? And I was like, yes. And they said it's in finance. And then I was like, oh no, that's the part that scared me more than going to Africa.
Was the brand well established when they asked you to go there, or were you going there to sort of get it going?
Yeah, they were just starting out. So it was a Danish company that was expanding overseas. So they just set up their subsidiary in Africa as a joint venture. But I think it was in maybe year 2 when I went in.
And you were probably quite young in your career.
Yeah.
So how did you flip from or pivot from the finance role I'm going to give you? Did you have a discussion with them and they said, we've got something else you can do, or?
No, I think that was the most challenging part.
You went and did finance?
I went and did finance, yes. So, which I think is a very good skill for marketeers to have. I think generally marketeers tend to shy away from numbers, but it's good to have that commercial mindset.
Because when you're in the coalface of any organisation, if you don't really know the other, you're a bit siloed from the other operations, but if you have some understanding of how finance works with sales and marketing, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, I always refer to the finance section as kind of almost driving from the back seat in a small business sometimes, because so much of a business is worrying about where the money is and everything, but only really the people in the front, and I'd say that's more senior leadership, marketing teams, sales teams, they kind of can see what's happening, they can see what's ahead, they should really be steering, and but everyone's supporting. So having having been in the finance department and understanding their point of view is so vital, you know.
Yeah, and 100%. I think like marketing people just think it's like creating all these really cool campaigns or bringing NPDs,
Yes.
but it's so much more than that. So even now, my boss, like, he's like, I have ownership of the P&L of my brand. So it's in order to succeed, I kind of need to understand how that works and not just talk about all these metrics that are fun to see.
I agree with your comment there, Dan. I think the intersection between finance and marketing, brand communications, whatever bucket you want to put it, is really where most leaders should be. For me, I have a real pain point around that. When I look at Australian business, so many leaders are chosen from the finance side. You just look at Qantas as an example. Qantas had the opportunity to take someone from the loyalty side, Olivia Worth. They took Vanessa Hudson from the finance side. And if you look through a portfolio of big Australian companies or Australian-based companies in the last 20 years, generally it's from accounting or finance. I think that's not the right way to go. I think the front seat people who can see where the car's going or the plane's going or whatever should be there. But having that finance background, I think it's going to set you up so well for a future career because, you know, you can play to that as well as play to the marketing side. I'd love to circle back just for one moment. Your Nigerian experience, how long were you there? Did you say it was
8 months? Yeah.
And although you're looking after finance, and thankfully nobody came in sort of like pirates that came down and sort of like tried to ransom or, you know.
Yeah, they were after people in the oil industry, not so much,
Not so much in
dairy.
the dairy category. Tell us how the organisation was going to try and change consumer behaviour. You've got a market that's used to powder and water. What was the plan? Because you were effectively going to build a new category of consumers.
Yeah, it was. So it was trying to make dairy just part of their everyday diet. So there was a huge work required in terms of making dairy as accessible as possible. And that's why thinking of sachets, having it at a reasonable price point so that everyone there could afford to buy that. I think that was a huge part of it. And then the education job in terms of why dairy is good for you and why it should be part of your diet. But it wasn't just a foreign multinational coming and selling dairy made in Denmark, but it was also helping dairy farmers in Nigeria improve their milk production, learning some of the practices from Europe.
For those, most of us would never have been there or will ever go there. What was the country like to work in? Because it sort of has one of those reputations from afar. Wow, it's going to be dangerous. I don't want to be going there. So you took a bit of a risk, no doubt, in your career and in your personal life almost to go to a foreign land like that.
Yeah, my mom says she didn't sleep for those whole 8 months that I was there. It was definitely not easy for my parents. But I think, and I mean, I don't want to generalize, but I think things look worse on the outside than they are on the inside.
Yes.
Also, you have to take these measures that you don't even think about on a daily basis here. For example, I would have a car and a driver take me everywhere.
Yes.
So the closest supermarket was probably a 10-minute walk, but I had to be escorted to the supermarket.
Wow, okay.
So I think, what I missed was just my freedom because I'm so used to walking on the streets here or not even thinking what time of day when I'm out and about.
It's a different mindset.
It's a different
mindset. You've got to change the way you behave day to day because you just can't take things for granted.
Exactly. So I would say I still had a very sheltered life in Nigeria because I lived in a bubble. I lived with other expats. I lived in a gated community. I had, the car and the driver. So I wouldn't say I lived like a local.
Yes.
I tried to be exposed to it, but the exposure was quite limited.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I suppose that would have made things harder to actually understand the consumers because, I mean, I find the public transport's the best way to get to know
100%.
what people are saying, what they're thinking, all that stuff. You know, I definitely do never wear headphones on the bus or train because everything that everyone talks about is what's happening right now. So to be in that shelter things makes your job, although you're in finance, I suppose, but it still gives you much less exposure to what people are thinking and saying.
100%. And of course, I had like local colleagues, and I think that was kind of my gateway to local culture as much as possible. But you're right, like you don't feel the real pulse of the country as much till you've sat in a bus with locals or you're walking on the streets and seeing and hearing things. So
I think a lot of people have often realised that although it's morphed into Uber and other driver services, taxi drivers knew more about a city than anybody else because they're picking people up from airports or international tourists or taking the local tourists, local residents to airports. taxi drivers were always a wealth of information. They probably still are.
Yeah.
I don't know whether Uber drivers know quite as much because, they're just very... But still, it's an interesting area, isn't it?
But
I just always remember thinking there's a lot of talk about radio chat in the taxis.
Yes.
Coming back to Sydney every time. It's like Alan Jones and everything.
You could pick up what was going on pretty quickly, couldn't you?
For sure.
Yeah.
But I would like to challenge people's misconceptions about Nigeria because
Good on you.
is. I think there's so many great things about it. It's the music there is amazing. The music scene, the culture, the art. It's a very colorful country. It's a very loud country. And people who've lived in Africa before have told me if you survive in Nigeria, you can survive in any other country in Africa because everyone hustles. Everyone's a bit more. I wouldn't say aggressive, but assertive. Just because they have to be with so many people in the country. Exactly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they're very kind and open-hearted.
One of the things that comes through in so many discussions is trying to stay authentic, I guess. In your experience, whether it's with Ben & Jerry's or Arla or now Bel Australia, sometimes the brand proposition can be sort of set back in head office. And often is. How do you feel authenticity comes through? What is it that's important to make sure consumers really feel like you are giving them a great product or a great proposition?
I think great brands are built on having that sort of universal appeal while being authentic. So it's kind of identifying who you're targeting and then what you stand for and then making sure it's consistent. And that's why people love different brands as well, because regardless of where it shows up or how it shows up, you know what brand it is. I would say it is hard when you don't have control over what the brand should be because it's set by global. But I think there's ways in which you can still make it quite relatable to the local environment. So for example, Ben & Jerry's, one of my favorite brands, and I always tell people that think if I was a brand, it would be Ben & Jerry's. Yeah, it's amazing. And, one of the key sort of tenets of the brand is having this activism spirit. And since its conception and since the founders themselves, I feel like it's a brand that really stands up for what they believe in. And that plays out so differently in different markets that it's in. So in the US, it's very much in terms of like racial equality. That's what they focus on right now. Whereas in Australia, I guess that wasn't the area we were focusing on, but it was still having an activism spirit, but it was more around environmental issues and sustainability. So it's still that we're not just selling ice cream, we're selling more than that, but then adapting it to the local culture a bit more.
That's amazing that I suppose they can still do that having been owned by Unilever as well, because one of the things we were talking about yesterday was the mergers and acquisitions of companies. I mean, traditionally, and I still don't understand why, but it's all based on money. The merger, like you buy a company based on, well, how much does it make? And at no point does anyone ever kind of say, what are the values? Are the values aligned? Is the culture the same? Because that's the only reason why you would really genuinely buy a company. Is like, do we carry the same values and is the culture the same? So I don't know, from outside perspective, you kind of go, why on earth did Unilever buy Ben & Jerry's? Because they're poles apart in terms of what their values are.
Obviously it was a brand that was quite close to the owner's heart, and they were trying to scale it up because there was only that far they could go being just like a mom and pop shop basically. And at that time and under that Unilever leadership, I think it was the closest in terms of alignment of values. And also one of the sort of agreements they had when they merged was that I think Ben & Jerry's could still maintain its authenticity. So
it's kind of written into the contract that they could keep their values.
Yeah. And over time, I think it's hard because obviously whoever takes over starts imposing a bit more. So it's a bit hard to stay true to who you are. But I think they're trying to find that balance as much as possible, even though I feel like, there's always a bit of conflict here and there between the two boards. If you think about it, Unilever has, compared to a lot of the other FMCG companies, there are a lot of brands that focus a bit more on purpose, whether it's like Dove or some of the other brands which are more focused on sustainability as well.
So it took me to leave Australia to realise and just to meet new people and talk to them differently. I had no idea that you actually have to pay to get your products into the supermarkets. I thought it'd be, well, they need the product, so wouldn't you just put it there? Oh, not many people know that, but brands pay for shelf heights and those kind of spaces. So maybe another reason why Ben & Jerry's was thinking we need this global alignment through Unilever is obviously they've got the clout, the trade guys come in and they say where it needs to go.
It's a fair point. I don't think a lot of consumers, unless they're schooled in the trade or what happens in the retail environment, know that at all. I remember a brand that we used to work for, it was literally at the shelf at eye level, and then the less they started spending and the less the proposition could be put forward to the buyer, they started sliding down, and at the end we're right at the bottom. And the whole thing just got delisted in the end and disappeared in the milk space. So I don't think the consumer realises that, and that's one of the interesting areas is what is the consumer proposition in Australia. And you have to, when you've got a series of products like a Babybel and Laughing Cow, your two big retailers are going to be a great percentage of your business, aren't they? Yes. So you've got to know how to work those relationships.
Yeah, so generally to get a product in, there's a range review process.
Yes.
So that's when you go and talk to the buyer of the category and make a case for why they need to keep your products. So in terms of bringing the data in and the consumer sentiment in, marketing's involved. So I think we're more giving more context into why they need to keep our brand or our product, and also at a certain level of the shelf or at a certain position of the shelf as well. So given that we have access to all the data, I think marketing and category work quite closely together to build those stories. But then in terms of the actual numbers and the negotiation around that, that's definitely more of a sales-driven approach.
Curious to know, what's a brand campaign you've worked on you think has been a great success and why? And then flip side, has it been something that's really taught you a lesson? There were some challenges in bringing that campaign to market in any of the businesses you've worked with in the past. So one a really good one, and maybe there's been a challenging one as well.
I think in terms of a good one, I'd probably use a Ben & Jerry's example. And it was a local campaign that we worked on. So it was more of our social mission side. Right. We launched a flavor. It was called This Is Our World, like This Is Our World. And it was with an organization called Our Islands, Our Home, and they work very closely with the Torres Strait Islander community because the islands are sinking and they're quite impacted by climate change. And again, the indigenous people have such close connection to nature. They probably saw this coming a lot before anyone else did. And by releasing this pint of ice cream, we were basically trying to drive more awareness about what's happening. They had a petition to the Australian government to provide a bit more support. And this was just a way of getting people to sign the petition a bit more and put their voices out there.
Did you see, was there an outcome? Were you able to help raise awareness of the issue and then potentially get them on a journey to do something about it?
Yeah, so I wouldn't give us credit that it was all because of us. But we were part of the journey, a bigger mission that they had, but they did manage to get awareness and support from the Australian government as well to say that this needs to be looked into. So
that's something that you've enjoyed and liked. How would that be gauged as a success from the outside? Like was it be like a campaign that would be celebrated at Cannes Lions or something like that?
I wish, but probably didn't.
I'm very annoyed because I haven't heard of it, and it's something that I would be really keen to see and know about. There's so many of these great campaigns that happen that aren't really ever heard of outside of the little bubble that we're in. Yeah, because
I think at the end of the day, the budget makes a big difference as well. Companies that have the big budgets and they're working with the big agencies, I think there's a bit more noise around that and a bit more lobbying. Whereas this, I think, is for so local, and we worked with local agencies, and it was pretty small, I would say, in comparison. So even though it has local impact, it probably is not as newsworthy out there for the likes of Cannes.
How have you been able to successfully not import the brand, but expand a brand in the dairy or cheese category where the local consumer may already have been very used to other brands or other taste profiles? And how has that worked for you?
Like Bega.
Yeah.
Craft barrel.
Craft.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I wish I was there right at the start when we brought the products in to see what they did. But I think what helps
Which was when, actually, out of interest? How long ago? 20 years?
More than 30 years ago
30
that we
right?
know of,
Right,
yeah.
I remember them at school. I remember the Babybels at school.
Yeah,
In your
so I think
lunchbox,
they've been in distribution for a while, maybe not having a whole lot of brand support, but they've been around for a while. I think what helps them is not the fact that they're European, and I think a lot of our consumers probably don't even know that it's made overseas. I think what helped both the brands is that they're quite distinct and quite differentiated. There's something quite unique about them that you can't find locally. And I think that's important, because if we were just to come in with the stringers or just blocks of cheese, it would be hard to compete with the Bega, which has so much more local provenance and the heritage of being Australian as well.
Yeah.
But I think what really helped our brands was that it was good quality cheese, but also quite unique. There's not many other small cheeses that kids can peel open with the wax on it, or having the triangle-shaped Laughing Cow cheeses as well. I think that was quite important. And also just, again, understanding a consumer need. And it doesn't matter if you're a French mom or an Australian mom, you want to give a kid something that's healthy, nutrition, convenient, and
portion controlled, I guess, too, really, isn't it?
Exactly.
Which is really important nowadays.
Yeah. So I think having that deeper consumer truth that is relevant across different markets, that helped as well. So it wasn't that you had to educate people on what to include in the lunchbox. It was more like, this is a fun and healthy option you can just put in the lunchbox, which helped.
And it does seem, both brands, if I'm not mistaken, Rucha, happiness, joy, is embedded in the brands. So it's a proposition. I think actually Cadbury might have gone down that path one day, literally the word joy recently. But yours is happiness, laughter, isn't it? Certainly the Laughing Cow.
Yeah.
Just share with our audience a little bit. The Laughing Cow particularly has this incredible history of this iconic sort of character, just to share that as a branding proposition or tool.
It's so funny because like the Laughing Cow has been around for hundreds of years. It was the first ever product that was made by Bel, and it was it was for portion control. And you're right, I think it's just the cow itself becomes so iconic, and maybe in markets where it's been around for much longer than it has here. But in France, you see like art created around Laughing Cow. They very much call it a pop brand because it's so ingrained in popular culture. The Laughing Cow sponsors the Tour de France as well in France as well. So it's just like associating it with like these big mass appeal sports or big cultural events as well. I think it has a very strong heritage also in North Africa, so in like Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, where it's one of the most popular brands out there. And it is a brand that's done really well across the board, and in developing markets. So it does really well, like in North Africa or in Southeast Asia. But it also does well in the more sort of Western developed world with the more sophisticated sort of food culture as well. So like in France or in the US as well. But yeah, I think that whole thing about bringing joy or laughter, it's again such a universal emotion.
Totally.
And then the brands capitalize that quite well to show that cheese brings laughter and joy into your life.
For a marketer like you, with a team that you're building now in Australia, what's your passion in terms of building teams or legacy you'd like to create when you're in marketing roles? Can you just share a little bit of that with us? What really drives you, and what are you trying to achieve beyond just the brand in market?
I think when you're building a team, it's kind of what we talked about before. I think there's so much potential in terms of what we can do, but it's like, what's the one thing you want to be famous for? So it's like, what would your legacy be? So thinking about what's that one thing you want the brand to be famous for in that year or in the next 3 years, and then really working towards that.
Is that something you're working on now? Like, is that something you want to do? Like, create something that people go, wow, I touched that. I was part of that. And that made us famous and the brand famous.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, in terms of the brand, so building more of that love, and also from, future talent pipeline perspective as well. Like the way I felt about Ben & Jerry's, I want people to feel about Babybel and Laughing Cow. The fact that these are really great brands that I want to go and work for because they are who I am as a person, or because they do really cool stuff in terms of innovation or campaigns. I think I would love to build brands that people want to work for and take ownership of.
That's fantastic. It's a great aspiration.
Is there any campaign that you're most proud of? Like, can you think of a specific thing?
Campaign? Yeah, we did a a campaign recently with Chris. It was for Babybel. It was the wax challenge. So I think one thing that makes Babybel quite special as a cheese is that it's got this wax coating on it that no other cheese brand, at least in snacking, currently has. And the cool thing about this campaign was that we got people to enter and eat the cheese, but also use the wax to make a statue. And it didn't matter how much skill you had, but it was just to use the wax in a creative sort of way. And we were quite blown away with the entries we got from all over Australia, where literally, red wax has been converted into like the Sydney Opera House or huge dragons or like some really funny creative ideas. And it was just a good way to see how people can connect to your brand beyond just the products. It's not just the cheese that they like, but it's the packaging, basically, like the wax and what they could do with that. So it was really nice to see the level of participation and enthusiasm from people, because we were asking a lot from them, to the fact that to go and buy the cheese, create the statue, take a photo, send it to us. But the fact that people were willing to do that, I think that was really cool.
It's interesting, just to amplify a little bit what Rucha is talking about, that campaign. The winning entry was brought to life in like a life-size wax sculpture at Bondi here in Sydney, at the Westfield Bondi. It was on show for a week. And I was fortunate enough to be involved in literally helping set up with the sculptor who we engaged to do it. The number of people that came past the sculpture even before we'd opened, like we were setting it up overnight on a Thursday night or something from memory anyway, it doesn't really matter what night of the week, and you could see people's nostalgia. People who had eaten Babybel as a child or had given to their children and saw this thing like, and immediately, because the winning entry was actually the cheese with these little mice sort of devouring it, like cheekily coming out at night to devour it. Quite incredible. And I think this comes to branding more broadly. You don't know what legacy or equity you have out there until you tap it. And when you tap it, you may get a great learning, a good one or a bad one. But I have to say, with this example, I was blown away at how many people went, oh my God, there's Babybel. Oh, we didn't put signage up at this stage. It was quite incredible. So I think you got cut through incredibly quickly. And I know for a fact that you've got a campaign running in Canada at the moment, which is just crackerjack, really. And so I think one of the things as a marketer, and we should close off, you might touch on this, well, you can see when you work for a global organisation, not everything has to be global, but sometimes the best learning from the market, if you think it fits your market, can be picked up and executed.
100%. I mean, we have the statue as a memory of a good souvenir.
We recreated the office in North Sydney. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And to your point, Chris, it's so funny because I hear people in the offices and they're like, oh yeah, I'd buy the Babybel statue, or there's kids being like, Mom, I want to go see the Babybel statue. So it's really become iconic even without having any logo or branding on it.
Correct.
One of the last things we ask is if anyone wanted to connect with you about future work or speaking engagements, is that how would people best get in touch with you?
I'm on LinkedIn, so I guess that's one way to connect. Otherwise, Chris has my details. So
Rucha, it's been wonderful talking to you today. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And all the best in your future endeavours. And we look forward to maybe talking to you again down the track.
Yeah,
sounds great. It's really good.
Thanks from the gurus.
To take a break and talk all things marketing and reflect on my career a bit as well. So thank you.